You're listening to the Career Jump Podcast. Insights, interviews, and success stories to inspire and give you the edge when you make your next career jump. Hosted by your career concierge, Andrew MacAskill.
Good afternoon, LinkedIn. Welcome to LinkedIn Changemakers Live. Andrew MacAskill here, very excited to be with you here today. And it's a real privilege to be part of the Changemaker campaign. Our topic for today is Work 2.0, which really we're talking about, COVID and the pandemic being a bit of a circuit breaker in the world of work that's brought a number of really important issues to the fore. And I'm really lucky to be joined by a couple of my fellow changemakers today who've got some really strong expertise. And we're going to take your questions on anything to do with the new world of work or careers or wellness, diversity and inclusion, whatever's hot in your world right now in terms of your working life. We're here to help and try and provide some value for you. Big hello to anyone who is joining us live. There's normally a bit of a lag between the live stream and the comments. If you are on the comments with us, please say hi. And if you've got any questions, just write a Q or write the word question for me into those comments. And we'll, after an initial intro, we'll get to that comment stream, start putting some up on the screen and tackling some of the things you're dealing with. So I can see the comments are there. Thank you, Jack Woods, for saying good afternoon. That gives me the reassurance that we are broadcasting and that everything's working okay. Without further ado, then, I'm going to invite Neil Laybourne up to say hi and to tell us a bit more about what he's up to. How you doing, Neil?
Great. Yeah, doing well today. Thank you, Andrew. Pleased to be on board.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you're a busy guy, so giving up time to do this is much appreciated. Just for the people on the stream who maybe haven't come across your work previously, haven't heard from you before, tell us about what you're the Changemaker for, and then tell us a bit more about the work you get involved with, mate.
Well, I always assume that nobody's come across my work, and I think that's the best place to start from. So if anybody has, sorry for repeating, but for those of you that might not be familiar, the reason that I'm on today, really, it all harks back from one sliding doors moment when I was involved in a suicide intervention in 2008. That was a very special moment for me when it turned into being reunited with the same person that I had that suicide intervention with 6 years later in 2014, which was dubbed as the globally trending #FindMike campaign. He thought my name was Mike, and obviously it's not, it's Neil. So that's always gone down in history. And yeah, from that sort of second moment on, that reunion between myself and that gentleman, Johnny, who is an amazing mental health advocate because of his lived experience, we went on a journey together from 2014, where first we developed a very unique friendship and we were mental health ambassadors. Through that friendship, I developed an ambassador relationship with a big national mental health charity called Rethink Mental Illness, who help support people a lot on the severe end of mental health spectrum diagnosis. And those first couple of years doing that through 2014, 15, 16, just taught me so much that I had no idea about, that people who have a diagnosis of mental health, can absolutely be and should not be hiding it, should be thriving, should be getting the support they need, either through their family, through their community, and more latterly, their workplace. So I made a transition about 2017 from my existing career in the fitness industry, getting people to do push-ups and pull-ups and running fitness retreats and, doing nutrition plans and all sorts of that stuff for a lot of kind of city folk. I transitioned to becoming full-time in the workplace mental health and wellbeing space. And luckily, because, I had a platform to do it, that suicide intervention that I mentioned became a Channel 4 documentary with me and Johnny called Stranger on the Bridge. And that was on Channel 4. It's on More 4 today. And it just gave us a huge platform to do work. And there were other milestone moments in my career that just allowed me to keep having this conversation, and especially around suicide, but also broader mental health topics. And part of that was being invited into a lot of workplaces very early on, say, 2018, 19, a lot of very traditional professional sector. It's a whole host of banking, accountancy, law institutions to tell our story and bring the conversation of mental health to basically staff populations that just didn't know how to have the conversation. Nobody internally was speaking up about this. And then latterly, it's really expanded out to like working with a lot of partners in the space, a lot of mental health solution providers, a lot of event forum organizations, to just keep advancing the conversation, keep convening people together to have that conversation. And the latest is the LinkedIn collaboration that I'm sharing with Andrew and our other host, Sonia, which you're going to hear from in a minute. And over the next 6 months, while we're still in this hybrid world of work, whereas I'm very much used to being in a room with those companies, with people discussing these topics, I'm still not able to do that, you know, as much as I want to. So having this LinkedIn Changemaker platform to host those conversations, you know, on LinkedIn while we're getting back to the office, for me is just amazing. And yeah, here today to share any of my experience in the last 7 years, going into many different organizations, many different workplaces, hearing many different stories from people all over the world, and to share any of that insight from any of the questions or any of the comments or anything Andrew wants to pick my brains on today.
Yeah, well, I've got a list, and equally, anybody in the comments, it's nice to see you already commenting and getting stuck in with us. Thank you for the interaction. If any of you have got any questions for Neil about anything wellness related, or how to look out better for your teams that you're leading, or whatever it might be, we're really lucky to have his expertise here. And just thanks for the work you're doing, mate, genuinely, to, I guess, reduce the stigma. Because I think for a lot of, you know, I think that's such an important piece of work that you're doing there, and we can all buy into that. Let's invite our colleague up now then, Sonia, who's joined us. Now, coming up now, hopefully, there we go. We've got Sonia in the room. How are you doing, Sonia?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here and finally doing a LinkedIn Live with my fellow LinkedIn Changemakers.
It's an absolute privilege to have you on. First of all, I can see a little bit of the book in the screen. Put it full screen for us. So Sonia's had an exciting week, haven't you? A #1 Amazon bestseller, from what I understand.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, it blew up on Amazon, which I'm very excited about, but also wasn't expecting. But as a point of introduction, so I graduated in 2015 and fell into the world of tech. I always say I fell in because when you're a graduate, you don't really know what is the world, and you just say yes to the first job that comes your way. And that was the technology industry. Unfortunately, though, whilst being in the technology industry, I found myself quite lonely and isolated, not just being the only woman in the room or the woman of color, but just not necessarily recognizing how you jump ship, how you build your career, how you really find your confidence. So in 2018, I founded a brunch club called Like-Minded Females, which is now one of the largest social enterprises and with the largest UK-based virtual mentoring program to support women in the workplace. And as a result of toxic workplace cultures and workplaces not really understanding the conversations around mental health or depression or confidence building and growth, I decided to start my own business at the start of 2020. So I currently run a diversity and business consultancy under my own brand name, have delivered over 30,000 hours of training in the last 18 months. Last year was offered a book deal, which is amazing. So Unprepared to Entrepreneur is now on the bookshelves and on Amazon across the world, which is exciting. Was announced a LinkedIn Changemaker for diversity inclusion, focusing on gender. Outside of that, have very much built my own community to encourage confidence building, career building, and capabilities within the workspace. Have a radio show on the BBC called The Everyday Hustle. And I'm doing everything I can to live a very honest and transparent life, be that posting on LinkedIn about my own work-life struggles, the future of work, or currently having the conversation before we just started to say I suffer from chronic migraines. And, you know, a couple of years ago, I used to be very, what would I say? Maybe ashamed is not the word, but I would be very hesitant going into the workplace and saying, hey, I'm suffering or I'm not feeling well, because I thought career opportunities would be taken away from me. And recently in the last year, I've realized that we need to humanize our experiences and not generalize. We need to make sure that we are, you know, talking through our trauma and what's taxing us so that others around us can have the support, that we can be brave together. But most importantly, the future of work is about establishing one where everyone feels like they belong and they can be their authentic selves and they can show up, do the work, build their careers, and still have balance and a peace of mind when they go home. And I think that's never been more important. So thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to get the conversation started.
Amazing intro. And I think we can all buy into that vision, right? That's exactly what it's all about. And that's what's exciting about the Changemaker campaign is I kind of see it as a move from LinkedIn to become more and more of a force for good to deliver on that vision that we all are buying into as well. So that's brilliant. What I'm going to do very quickly is just go to the comments and welcome some of our participants, if that's okay, with my co-hosts. So Jack Woods, hello. Jennifer Chen, thanks for joining us. Hi, Charlie. Good to see you. David says hi, and what an amazing event. Thank you. It's only going to get better from here, I promise, once we get into the Q&A. How are we doing, Si? Nice to see you. Therese Jaeger. Chloe, good to see you back on these streams. Nice to see you. Liz is on and happy to connect. And equally, if any of you are keen to make new connections today, just write happy to connect. People can kind of hover over your picture and make new connections. We've got Will Southers. How you doing, sir? David MacAskill is my cousin. How are you? Good to see you, mate. A little bit of family support never does any harm. Karen's in. Sarah Fitton says, loving this campaign and great to meet another Changemaker. Thank you, Sarah. It's really good to be collaborating in this way. We're all really privileged to be involved, right? Like, it's such an awesome campaign. Colin's in, Glenn's in. God, there's a lot of you out today. Thank you for joining us live. It's really, really good. First question I can see is aimed at Neil from Liz. So, Neil, Liz is asking if you had to pick one key change you'd like to make, what would it be? That's a good question.
Yeah, saw that one come in. Ready to dive into that one. Great question. Because, you know, the topic that I'm responsible for through this Changemaker campaign, which is, you know, mental health and wellbeing in the workplace, is pretty all-encompassing and, you know, can be confusing for a lot of people for many, many reasons. And so one of the great processes that I was lucky, and I'm sure the other guys were lucky to go through, was trying to figure out with the LinkedIn team, you know, what our purpose was. And I think for a lot of us, it was already clear already in our own heads. But, you know, it was certainly important to find a way that was going to like cut through and get messages across for everybody, you know, for a platform that has 750 million users. You know, it's really important to make sure that people understand what you're talking about. And when I go into a workplace, I can have a very nuanced conversation about a particular change in a particular area of their culture for their team. For this overall campaign, though, Liz, I think for me, we settled on a tagline which was very collaborative, which was to make mental health as important as physical health. And I think that we all understand how workplaces embody, look at, and just accept that they have to make sure people are physically safe, you know, and their physical well-being is looked after. And it's only now that that has really started to happen for mental health. So I just want to get behind and keep encouraging that, you know, from day one, when somebody joins the organization, like Sonia, you know, new out of college, maybe needs help and support to figure out who they are at a young age coming in, that it's the responsibility of the employer to say, hey, we're not going to wait for you to come forward and tell us what you're struggling with. Well, that could be on the other end of the spectrum. Somebody who's been in the company, you know, 30 years, that the organization comes up to them and says, we're going to bring this conversation to you. We're going to show you how we put mental health first. And what I want to do is find the best examples of what that looks like and bring it to the platform so that we can move the dial forward and that other people, other organizations can be inspired to do that, take those examples and make change. So quite simply, Liz, let's make mental health as important as physical health.
How do you feel about that, Sonia? Lots of nodding coming from you in the on the other side of the screen there.
I really resonate with it. So I come from a South Asian family. Culturally, we don't talk about mental health very well, and we don't talk about problems that we are facing, and it's never really been put into motion. So, you know, South Asians have one of the highest rates of suicide and mental health and well-being, or kind of they're on a number of spectrums individually. And I think I had to combat that barrier, but also when I went into the workplace, I was already tagged as a woman and the woman of color. So there was a lot of pressure to perform. And I think when you combine that pressure with the tags that other people are putting on you, you start to lose yourself and your identity. And then I added a layer of like depression and mental health and chronic migraines. And I think the worst comments I received was, hey, Sonia, you have so much energy. We don't believe you. Right. Even now, I'm sure there are people sitting there being like, well, she said she's going through a migraine, but she's got it under control because you live with your condition. whatever condition that is, and you really sort of pass it. But I've worked for 3.5 companies, and each company have said, we don't believe you, we don't have anything ready for you. That's great, really important, but actually our clients are more important. Or I've even had a manager say to me, well, if that's what you're struggling with, you're not really going to surpass a certain point in the ladder, because you're going to have to be always on. And I think my point is, individuals now are more and more are looking for organizations that are value-led, that are culture-ad, that are focusing on their well-being, that are making sure performance is also linked to productivity, also linked to happiness, also linked to support that they are encouraging within the business. So as a business unit, what is your onboarding process? What are your policies around safeguarding well-being and mental health? How do you support individuals with sick pay if they are off? And how do you support them with workloads if they're finding that they don't have a work-life balance? Young professionals that are walking to the business want to stay with the business and be loyal long-term, but they also want support on a variety of issues that are now coming into the landscape. How are you educating your internal staff members to make sure that they either are able to support the conversations, that if they're not, they know how to have empathetic conversations and pass them on to the right people, right? This is more than just mental health first aiders. This is supporting managers, line managers, and colleagues in knowing how to answer the questions and approach it in an empathetic way, and not make the other person feel lesser than because they have something wrong with them. And in most cases, when something is going through and you're discovering something about yourself or your body, you don't even know what's going on, right? So if one week you're feeling a certain way and another week you're feeling another way, it's not because you're pretending, it's because you're living through the motions. And I think as a society, we just need to humanize our approaches a little bit more. We need to focus on our mind over matter. And we need to remember that if we're not good in ourselves, how can we be good in our business? And as an entrepreneur, and especially as a young entrepreneur, I'm fairly young in comparison to an average age of an entrepreneur. I have a whole chapter in my book called Mind Over Matter, because I don't think we talk about mental health and the future of work and well-being enough. And we're not taught it in schools. We don't see it in the cartoons that we watch as young kids. But we really need to bring up the conversation so that we know it's normal and it's natural, and everyone is going through it.
Love that. And what really excites me is how young entrepreneurs like yourself are so much more open about it, because I think that's so important, particularly in this age of comparison. We all know about comparison being the source of all misery, right? But there's never been more opportunity to compare. And somebody from the outside might look at you as somebody who's being successful on the radio, on the TV adverts, publishing books, and think, oh, Sonia's just got it all worked out. She doesn't have any of the stuff going on that I might have going on, right? But it's just simply not the case, is it?
No, I mean, Sonia is in a lot of pain, and she is 2 hours or 3 hours away from a cluster headache. And a cluster headache is a headache that lasts anywhere between a week and 2 weeks. But that's why I realized, and exactly to what you just mentioned, I realized that social media is so much more than self-promotion. So I use my social platforms to share my experiences, to talk about the struggles, to emphasize the failures. And, sometimes I'll even post and say, look, I'm out for the next few days off from posting from content because I need to focus on my health. And it's interesting because posts that get the highest engagement are the normalized posts. They're the ones where we talk about our struggles, our failures, and how we deal with them. I get a number of messages all the time from people saying, it's so great that you've been able to deal with this, or you know how to cope. Can we have some templates that we can send to our managers? Do you have an email that you've written that we can send to our colleagues? What is the best way of you being able to handle this, and what can we do going outwards? And these are conversations you have to also start with your family. I think it's all well and good talking about the workplace, but a lot of your decisions are first and foremost influenced by your family or friends and the socialized kind of groups that you're in. How are you having conversations with your circle before you're even going to your company and colleagues, because your circle needs to be involved? And I think it's, there's a humbling experience to say, well, if you're online, the power is in your hands. So you talk about what you need to talk about. And for me, mental health and my own personal struggles are really important, because I don't ever want someone to think, oh, she's made it and she's just smashing it and there's nothing going on wrong with her life. Because actually you're sacrificing a lot to run a business, and it's extremely taxing. And we need to acknowledge the changes that you're going through as an individual, emotionally, physically, and mentally. And as Neil mentioned, we need to focus on our mental health the same way we do our physical health. It's we need to get up and do something about it, or at least start the conversation so we can learn from others on how we can cope and manage.
100%. Very, very well said. Liz, the success spark. You certainly sparked a really good discussion there. So thank you for putting a question forward. And Sonia, as I said to you before the call, if you need to leave at any point, just let us know. We really appreciate you being here, but your wellness is definitely our priority. So let's go back to the comments, see who else is here. Liz, as well as that, said congrats on the launch, Sonia. So some really good well wishes coming from
Thank
group
you.
there. Ah, there we go. Yeah, unprepared to entrepreneur. Get on it. I got my dispatch notice yesterday because you gave me the heads up about the pre-order. So I'll be diving in and looking forward to reading that when it arrives. Now, Frances is a CEO from a not-for-profit background who I know well because she's one of my clients and is an awesome person. Now, what are we talking about here, Frances? Question for Jarl. Okay, very good. We'll pretend we're not from London. Where would you start as a leader taking on a new organization, looking to develop from scratch the very best in well-being mental health support for employees? Wow, Neil. So potentially Frances lands as a CEO in a new organization, which is, you know, very much what might be happening for her. Where do you even start? Like, blank canvas. What's your thoughts on that one?
Sure. Congratulations if you've just happened to get that job, Frances. That's amazing. And yeah, for anybody else in that position, the fact that there's actually so many ways now to implement well-being strategies can make it so confusing for people. And maybe something that's going to fit across the board, right? Whether you are a CEO of a very lean startup and you've got five people working for you, whether you've just inherited this behemoth, multinational conglomerate, hopefully there's a couple of principles that can span across both of those. Listen, if you've got budget to spend, that's amazing. But I do honestly feel that spending money is something that you should definitely be getting the best return investment on, because you can't spend that budget twice. And there are so many things to do that are free and can enhance your culture before you decide about where you spend money. So that'd be the first thing I would do. So that a couple of examples of what you would implement straight away would be, one, have a policy. Sounds simple, doesn't it? A lot of big companies I know, and when I start talking to them, they might have been around a decade, 2 decades, and they've only just started looking at well-being. They don't have a manifesto, a policy. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely committal to outcomes, but it just says, it could be a 1 page that, take that strapline I said, we make physical health as important as mental health, or something Sonia picked up on. We want to make sure that our mental health programs cut across all of our diversity and inclusion spectrum, so have a policy, have a manifesto, have something you can pin your hat on that gives you a North Star. And the best way to create that is just to find people in the organization that are passionate, set up a committee, let them know that it's going to be something it's not going to be a waste of time. You're going to take these ideas, you're going to look at them, and you're going to invest in them, and you're going to run with them. There is stuff out there off the shelf that you can pick up and implement. There have been for a few years now pledges, commitments that you can sign, and will tell you what to commit to and what the actions look like. Secondly, and again, this is something that I hope would span across, small to big, is there will be people in your organization, even if there's only, 10 of you, that have something that they want to declare about their mental health. Whether or not it's a diagnosis, just the fact to acknowledge that, okay, this is something we all have and we manage it every day, and we're just going to talk about what that means for everybody. So what I'm talking about is storytelling, and it's free. People use me and other people that I help bring in to tell those stories, because unfortunately maybe a culture has been developed over time. Sonia alluded to that, a bit of a toxic culture that you've got to undo first before you can allow that to happen. If you're lucky enough to start from the get-go and just say, no, we're going to have an open culture, let's start sharing with each other what our mental health journeys look like. And that could be something as simple as, what's going on in your world today? What are your challenges? What are your opportunities? And I would love to see big companies do that more than to just be spending money on stuff and it doesn't get picked up because the culture of acceptance isn't there. And it's something that smaller companies can do, extremely well. And maybe just the third thing to top that off is whoever's in the most senior position has to set that tone. the leadership of tomorrow, because we're talking about the future of work, the 2.0 leadership version is where, you know, the hard skills that people thought about are no longer the hard skills. The best skills are the people skills, the empathy skills, shared vulnerability, being able to communicate to your team that, you know, you are not infallible, that you're not superhuman. And if you can communicate that as a leader, other people will start to follow in your footsteps, and you'll have open teams, open culture, open communication, and better outcomes for the business. Because there's nothing wrong with having a good business and earning money. Even if you're in a non-profit sector, you know, you've got to have continual development to exist in that space. So hopefully if we tie those three things up for you, that if I was going to step into a new organization or advise somebody, I would say, have a manifesto, have a pledge, okay? Make sure that you guys understand it, it's simple, and you communicate it to everybody. Get some peer-to-peer network going on, find out what is already out there that's free, and start storytelling and get the most senior people to start communicating what their mental health is. And what you've got then is the foundation of a good culture to build on. And if you step into it and you've inherited a bad organizational culture around being open, talking about well-being, then yeah, you've got to start undoing some stuff, and that's another topic of conversation.
Yeah, transformation is significantly harder than starting from the start, that's for sure. Love that. I love the bit about being the change you want to see. I think there's almost like the equivalent of greenwashing going on with mental health at the moment, with people talking a good game on the website about it, but the leaders are still there till 9 o'clock every night. And there's that contradiction, isn't there, that exists in a lot of businesses.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is as well, you know, if you've been in that organization a long time and you're not necessarily doing it because it's a badge of honor, but you don't know any other way. So like you've been maybe conditioned that success for you, you know, is monetary, or success is status, or success is power. And maybe through no fault of your own, you've been conditioned, and that's what you're showcasing. I think now we've got an opportunity, we really do, to define with people in the workplace, well, what is success to you? And as a company, we'll help you achieve that. I think genuinely, if through conversations, you can find out that success to some people is going to be financial, great. Help them achieve that. Because having a strong financial pillar to your well-being will help loads of other stuff going on in your life. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you determine, again, through culture building and conversations, that success for somebody else is being able to be a better father, or being more supportive to somebody at home that you need, or, you know, improving the environment in your local community and get involved, or doing something, then your workplace can help you to achieve that success. And what I think it is some of the generation were never asked the question what success is for them. They were just shown success is money, is status, is power, and therefore that's what they strive for. And I genuinely think that if people had the opportunity again, they would seriously redefine what success is. I've met many leaders, you know, the stale, pale male group, that I'm going to be seen as one day, you know, in another, you know, not too far distant future, I'll be seen as a pale, stale male, you know. And I'm conscious, you know, I've got to be showcasing, like you say, I don't want to be greenwashing. I try to share things about myself that I feel really uncomfortable sharing about my mental health when I'm having mental health conversations. I don't find it easy. I don't have a cause to do it, because generally, actually, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty resilient. I tend to get through the day okay. You know, I still have stuff that I'm embarrassed about my own mental health. And I feel like if I can share little bits, you know, it helps me to set that tone. And that's called, I've got a term for that, shared vulnerability. It actually really helps people to share with you if you're, and that, for me, that is the leadership of tomorrow.
I love that. Shared vulnerability. Yeah. By being vulnerable, you make it okay for others to be the same, is what I read into that.
Hey, everybody. It's Andrew here. Just wanted to very briefly interrupt this podcast episode to tell you a little bit more about our Career Jump Club. So our Career Jump Club was created to help job seekers understand what they want and how to get it, right? So becoming a club member is a great move if you're looking to get the clarity and confidence in order to secure your next role. With the membership, you get a number of different things. So First thing you get is access to our online platform, which has over 30 videos, 40, 50 different templates, workbooks, and it takes you through everything from sort of understanding what you want to how to position your CV and LinkedIn, how to interview, how to close offers and negotiate better salaries, a full end-to-end job search course effectively for senior leaders. So you get that, you get a fortnightly group coaching call, which is with me and with the other members, where we bounce around best practice, share slide decks, share techniques, and share the latest data on what's working for people. And you get to, most importantly, become part of our closed LinkedIn group and our closed community. And in there is where the magic often happens, because you get people referring each other into opportunity, supporting each other, and just sharing. And that's what it's all about. So if you're financially able and you'd like to invest in your job search, head on over to www.careerjump.com, all one word, /club. And you'll find the landing page and come and give it a go. We'll see you in there. Anyway, back to the pod.
Sonia, what's your thoughts? Say you end up scaling out some of the businesses and organizations that you're involved with. What's your kind of thought process around creating an environment that is supportive to these kind of issues?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I completely echo the define your measure of success. Not everyone has had that understanding or that privilege or that conversation. I think we have to also add an intersectional layer onto these conversations. Sometimes you are from a family situation or from a background where you cannot leave a toxic workplace, where you cannot leave a certain business because it's providing you with the wealth in order to support your family. And I think it's really important to focus on intersectionally. There are different ways that we can approach this, but from a company perspective, you need to have those conversations first. So the same way that you are outlining your processes and your policies, I need to see a policy for well-being. I need to know what you are going to do when conversations around sick days occur. What are some of the benefits that you're offering your team members, be that 4-day working week all the way to apps and support or therapy and counseling that can be. Resources, so that if somebody feels a certain way, they know exactly where they should be heading to or how they can approach that conversation. And if you don't have that in that moment, but someone comes to you, the conversation needs to be, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We are going to make this a priority and we are going to figure out what we can do right now, rather than they're saying, do you know what? That's great. You've mentioned that, but actually this is not a priority for 6 months. 6 minutes is the difference between someone feeling good and feeling bad. 6 months is the difference between someone being here and not being here, right? Fundamentally, it's literally, it can be that deep. I think also we ourselves need to be kinder. And what I mean by that is, if you're starting at an organization, we need to take into account that organizations don't know everything, right? They are still built by humans and by people who are trying to do a little bit of everything and not anything very, very well. Because when you're starting an organization, you are wearing multiple hats. So I am my CEO, my founder. I'm also my marketing lead. I'm also the PR person. I'm also the accountant. I'm also, the email admin, whoever it may be. So I can also appreciate from a founder perspective that not everything crosses your mind. And so as leaders of the business, we need to take in our stride to say, thank you for bringing that to our attention. We hadn't considered that before. This is what we're going to do about it, and actually do the actions at the end. We can also support communities and get in touch with collectives that are already doing the work. Sometimes what I find is companies will throw money at the problem, but not actually support the communities or charities that are already doing the work. Bring them in-house. They have the expertise. You don't need the expertise in-house, but you need to be collaborating with an organization that knows what they're doing. And the last thing I would say is, when you have mental health first aiders, be that in a small scale up or a large business, what are you doing to support those individuals? Because those individuals may have had training, but they're also taxed out, right? They're not necessarily trained counselors or professionals. They need the support as well if colleagues are going to them in safety and in confidentiality. I think that, to really answer your question and to bring it back, because I appreciate I come at it from a different angle, but it's really, where would you start as a leader taking on a new organization? You will educate yourselves to understand what is necessary for you to start. You will listen to the experiences of others, and it's really important to do that research. Build policies and processes from the get-go so that those who are coming into the organization know exactly what they can, what support is available and what support is missing in terms of knowledge gaps and what they can bring in. Work with communities and charities who are already doing the work, and don't feel like you need to set up your own establishment internally, but find the resource externally if need be. And most importantly, always have those conversations openly as leaders, as senior stakeholders, as junior members of the company, and know that often, more times than not, the conversations are going to be challenging, they're going to be difficult, but we need to start having them so that we can carry it forward. And lastly, always remember that there is not one size fits all approach. Intersectionally, I come from a working class background. I'm a woman of a South Asian heritage. The conversations I have around mental health and what impacts my mental health and future of work and how I take that back into my family is obviously always going to be different to somebody else's experience. So remember that experiences, individual, unique perspectives are important, but let's have the resources so we can adapt to everyone's experience rather than say, this is all we can deliver, and it's either take this or nothing.
Amazing. Absolutely love that. I love the point about empathy and compassion upwards as well, because until you've sat in the seat, it's very easy to spot the gaps. And I just love the fact that you brought that up, because that's also been a big learning for me. I'm a parent, and it kind of reminds me of that, in that all the stuff I used to complain that my mum and dad did, I now do. And it's leadership's a little bit like that. I used to look up at the people I've gone, why are they doing that? And then you sit in the seat and you're like, well, actually, now I kind of get it. And I've gone back to previous bosses and actually said sorry, because I'm kind of like, now I've had a look under the bonnet. I understand what you were dealing with. And do you know what? I was quite difficult. So I love the fact you brought that up. And just to build, just my 90 seconds on this, Francis, I really thank you for the question. I want to build a bit further on Sonia's idea around this tailoring experiences, because that's what I think, from my limited expertise on mental health, but understanding careers, I think the tailoring is what's important. So we've gone from historically very hierarchical structures to more matrixy type structures. But I think the businesses that win in the longer term are going to be more ecosystems. And these ecosystems are going to be a mix of employees, of contractors, of suppliers, of freelancers, of consultants. And those ecosystems will give humans freedom within a framework in order how they interact with that ecosystem to A, look after themselves, and B, maximize their productivity. Because no two people are different. And I think the cookie cutter process, foundations for scale type language of trying to make things too McDonald's and repeatable is what's causing a lot of the problems. And I think the organizations that bring in that curated, tailored experience and create that kind of environment are going to be the ones who win. So it's exciting times if you can unlock it. And whoever ends up with Frances in her team are going to be very, very well set up. She totally gets it. The fact she's even asking it. Oh, look at that. Zoe's plugging the book for you as well, Sonia. You're doing well on book plugs today.
Thank you.
The other thing, we've got another 20 minutes. If anybody wants to actually come up on the virtual stage and meet us, Zoe, if you're still on the stream, please put a link in to the StreamYard. If you guys come on, as long as you're clothed and polite, we'll throw you up out of the green room on here. If anyone's brave enough to come and have a chat with us about something, it could be anything you like regarding the future of work, then I'll throw that invite out to you. If anyone fancies that in the last 20 minutes, we'll do that. So lots of people happy to connect and interested in development. Please make sure you can do that. Steve's got a question for us. Steve, I'm currently looking at contract roles as typically do not get any benefits from the company. What can companies do with mental health support, or what can I do for myself? Yeah, so a lot of people are working in more of a contract or consultancy type way. And we're seeing that as a broader trend, right? Particularly during the pandemic, a lot of people have kind of seen that as a bit of a circuit breaker and gone down their own route. But the point being that a lot of that flexible workforce doesn't tend to get the same level of support. So the policies and things you were talking about earlier, Neil, do you think those can be extended to the flexible resource pool as well as the employed pool, or what springs to mind there?
Yeah, I think anything can be extended out if there's bandwidth and understanding that you're not just your own entity. You know, you are as much a success as your contractors, your outsourcers, your supply chain. You know, and I think a recent thing, you know, which is absolutely standard now, is say most metrics are placed on customer satisfaction scores, you know, rather than, you know, internal drivers and, you know, like revenue targets. So that's pretty standard now. That had its own journey to go through to change, a customer and a company being client focused rather than, say, you know, internally focused. And I think the same now is happening for, the resource that makes up the company, which is the people. And the landscape is rapidly changing. A lot of people will have made a transition recently because of the pandemic and not necessarily had the experience of kind of having to take their own approach to work. And, you know, to put a bit of context on that, when I was working as a personal trainer and had done different business models and grown a business that went above just the one-on-one model, I still found that you had to navigate your day to kind of keep your motivation up, keep your energy up, keep your client engagement up, keep your sales up, and not having any support as a self-employed entity. And I had that experience for maybe a decade or more before coming into the pandemic. So when I inherited this environment that was prescribed to us, stay at home, work at home, work to your own autonomy, it was already a thriving environment. I was like, I know what to do. When, it felt like the walls were closing in, I knew what to do. I'd had the practice. Yeah, managing your own, the own way that you are successful. And I think what we've got to realize is people will come into the workforce and want that autonomy. Even people with great experience, great CVs, great success behind them, but would have never actually had that experience. So as the workforce at large is migrating to that, there will be a lot of people management issues to solve along with that. People will be struggling within the first 6, 9, maybe even 2 years, working out that they're lacking structure, they're lacking social engagement. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to plug that, to teach people skills that they have to implement when they're on their own in their office or out of a team. And I think the biggest thing that helps me, because I still deal day to day now in that fashion, most of my client engagements are very small, a lot of different clients over a lot of different companies. And I'm running it as actually quite a small business. So I still have those challenges day to day. I just ask to be treated, fairly. Like, I want my invoices paid on time. I don't want any stress, to deal with, with that. Like, when I'm requesting communication, with you to get to the end goal, as a contractor, I don't want to be felt like I'm at the back of the queue. I just want to be felt like I'm part of the organization. I kind of want to be let in. I want to also have passion and purpose with what I do, which will help me navigate the tough times, because at least I feel I'm connected. I love it when I'm working with an organization and they bring me into the living room. They introduce me to other parts of the business, or they just make me feel like I'm part of the organization. It helps me stay grounded. It helps me stay connected to the cause of what I'm doing, because, unfortunately there will be issues that they won't be able to fix for me because we're just too far removed. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult one to answer. But what I'm going to say is just be mindful that, like, I think one thing we learned through this pandemic, and it was pushed through the news and the media, is we have about 5-6 million self-employed people in the UK. And we know that because of all the talk of furlough and what people have gone through. And it's also highlighted that you don't need much to go wrong for those people for them to be pushed into very, very stressful situations. Because there's
100% right.
Yeah, there's lack of benefits, there's lack of support, and a lot of people are only a month, 2 months, 3 months away from running out of cash flow. So when you're hiring in contractors, if that population is going to double in the next 5 or 10 years, which it sounds like it might do, if we're going to have 10 million contractors in the economy, those are going to be the issues of people. So if companies can get their heads around thinking, not only have we got to support our employees, we're going to have to support more of our supply chain in a way that we've never used to. That might have knock-on effects for the business. So anything they can do to get their heads around, supporting the self-employed, supporting the contractor, is going to be great. And I think, there's very little in place at the moment. And I would like to see that extended out through their policies, through their manifestos. I don't know what it actually looks like, to be honest, but I know that if we're having those conversations for our own employees, because we have to, there's a lot of talk on the chat about ISO, I should know it off by heart, basically having psychological safety at work, having psychologically safe practices at work. There's a lot of talk now that has to happen. And you can cut through that noise and just say, what it really means is you've got to make sure that you're being empathetic and you're caring about your workforce. You genuinely have to care. I would just like to see that extended out to people beyond who have an employee status. You know,
totally. How we get paid is just a mechanism, right? How we get paid is just a mechanism. So I totally agree. Now I'm very excited because we've got somebody in the green room who's going to come up as well. Thanks for that answer, Neil. Steve, I hope that really helps. There's some really good stuff in there, guidance to employees, but also guidance for you as an individual. So Liz, who was sparking success with her question earlier, has turned up in her green room. So what we're going to do, we're going to put Liz up on the screen to say hi, have a bit of interaction with her, and then maybe we'll come to Sonia, depending on what Liz is looking for some ideas about. Yeah. How you doing, Liz? Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Very warm welcome.
I seem to be monopolising this today. I do apologise.
No, not at all. We really appreciate the interaction. So have you got a question or a point that you'd like to get on the table, please?
I do. It's a question for all of you, actually. So the question I'd like to ask you is, what do you think's the biggest factor that's helped you to be successful and to be named as LinkedIn Changemakers?
Sonia.
It's such a great question. I wasn't expecting that. I think my story is a little bit different because I only really started understanding who I was and using social comms about 18 months ago to 24 months ago. So I think to take a step back, what has really driven me is taking the time to get to know myself a little bit better, right? You go into school, you go into university, you go into education. My parents were like, get a degree, then you've made it. I went into the world of work and I was like, this is just the adults version of high school. It was very political. There was a lot and you haven't learned those skills. And I had to take myself away from that to realize, who am I? What is it that I want to do? What are my passions? What am I good at? And am I actually using those skills that I have in my role? And it turns out I wasn't. So I were doing roles that were like operational and admin heavy, not my skill set. I'm a great communicator. I like to educate people. I'm awesome at facilitating. I can go out and speak to a crowd and make sure that we're really comfortable being uncomfortable. So first it was identifying my skills. Then it was talking to people. So, okay, now I know my skills. What are the roles that are actually available out there? What can I be doing? Where can I satisfy my need and still add to my purpose? So a lot of networking, a lot of support from mentors and communities. And I'm very, grateful that I've been able to build my own community, but that's because I didn't have one. So I think even acknowledging that there's a gap in the market, seeing how you can fill that gap. And then lastly, not being afraid to take risks. I'm not afraid of failure. Ironically, failure is literally what got me a TED Talk, right? It's called Failure Comes Before Resilience because I failed probation. I was unable to keep the job roles that I was in. I failed my own health. And what I realized is I'm really good at breaking things really quickly. So what that's great is you can give everything a go, see how it works for you, see what the end goal is, and see if it outlines and really kind of see data-led if it meets your kind of purpose or principles. So I always say, what's your 5 principles? Anything that I do needs to meet at least 60% of that 5. So it could be, entrepreneurship is one, and confidence building is another, and diversity inclusion is another. I say yes to anything that fits 60% of that principle and figure the 40 out, and then let it lead and let it lead. And I think through LinkedIn, the great thing about LinkedIn for myself as a platform is you don't have to be pretty or aesthetically pleasing. You have to be honest and factual. And it needs to be in a position where you know exactly what you're talking about. So I know what I talk about. I'm not afraid to challenge the system in terms of what I share. But it's always got a clear call to action. That call to action is, how can you get better? How can you feel better about yourself? How can you use this in your workplace? And how can you incorporate this into a better life moving forward? So I definitely did not think that I'd be a LinkedIn change maker or that I'd have that influence. But I think at some point it was about taking a risk on yourself, being your biggest cheerleader, and not being afraid to get things wrong so that you can figure out what feels right and is right for yourself.
Amazing answer. Absolutely awesome. Neil, what's led to this kind of recognition for you?
I think role modeling and from the right people in my life. There's been a cumulative effect, and if people can get good role models, that's amazing. And I find myself fortunate in that. There is a counter to that. I think that if you're faced with adversity and you find ways to overcome that adversity on your own, it helps you to build confidence, and it helps you to be comfortable, get comfortable being uncomfortable and pushing your boundaries all the time. So there's a mix of the two. I'm really lucky because I had great role models in my parents who just were very encouraging. Growing up in my late teens and early 20s before construction, before the fitness industry, I was in construction, and I spent a lot of time around basically quite a hard bunch of guys, and I didn't like a lot of them, but they, you know, they had a lot of grit, a lot of determination, and it was success or failure, you know. And I picked up a lot of character building, role modeling from those guys. And I always remember this one boss that I had, and I didn't particularly like him at all, to be honest. But, you know, one morning we were just talking, and he just said to me, listen, Neil, if you don't like something in your life, you better change it, because no one's going to do it for you. And it was this one moment on this one day, and it wasn't even a significant day. And I just always remember that, you know, and I was given that message by my parents. And yeah, and I think because as well, like Sonia said, working class background, you know, that married with having to overcome certain obstacles. When I became a personal trainer, I really had to push myself to, you know, go into the city. I didn't have A-levels or a degree. So I finished at GCSE level, you know, got myself into the city. And then I started to meet a different caliber of people that I'd been exposed to growing up. I started to meet executives, CEOs, you know, and I think because I was training them, they were in their 40s, I was in my 20s, they were in their 40s and 50s. They wanted to help me out. You know, they took me out for lunch, and they would, I wasn't a threat. I wasn't a competitor. I wasn't, you know, people like to pay it forward when they get older and they've achieved stuff. And I was the beneficiary of that advice. And I was always really grateful for that. And I would always take the time to get my free lunches. And I want somehow through my platform to show people that if they haven't had the conventional way to what we talked about before, success, that like you can find your own way there just by having good role models, good, you know. And there was a point where my paradigm of thinking changed, you know, and I decided, you know, yeah, I wasn't going to put up with stuff that I usually would have put up with before. And you never know when that moment in your life is going to happen, and you need to be receptive to that. So good role modeling for me, and actually having challenges, having adversity, I think is very, very healthy.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I just want to say quickly, unfortunately, some people, and I get it, but when they're going through those adversities, they also don't have the role modeling, and they have a lot of other challenges as well. And I've learned that through the ambassador work in charities. Unfortunately, the chips are stacked against you sometimes, and it is going to be very difficult to achieve success. But I think there's enough role models out there now with social media and connectivity that there are also many examples of when the chips really are stacked against somebody, you can be dogged, you can be successful, and you can achieve your goals. And if our voices through the Changemaker platform shows people that, hopefully, you know, that's going to make a huge difference.
Totally. Yeah, a lot of growth to come from adversity for sure. I love that message. I'll keep it really brief, Liz, and then we'll dive onto a question from Trish. But there's three kind of pillars that I think have helped me. Number one, I don't do a single thing that I'm not very good at. So anything that's not a strength, I just get rid of straight away, like much to the frustration of all my colleagues. Like I just don't even touch it. I think this idea of working on your weaknesses is a complete waste of time. I know I'm useless at that, so I don't go near it. That's number one. Number two is the compound effect of doing something over a long period of time. And we all know about that, right? Atomic Habits is the best book that's ever been written on that, in my view. But it took me 10 years to get 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, and then 10 months to get to 80,000, right? So this compound effect of just doing something consistently over time. And then the third thing, which is more of a philosophy, is the idea of the more you help people get what they want, the more you'll get what you'll want. And I'm a big believer in reciprocity, paying it forward, doing things behind the scenes, not for content, like stuff that we never talk about, just doing as much as you can in the ecosystem. And I believe it pays you back. So thanks so much for the opportunity to talk about that, and for coming up onto the virtual stage with us. Yeah. We wish you all the best.
Thanks for having me.
Good luck with your own business. Thanks for your time. So we've got a lovely question here to wrap from Trish, which I think is just such a timely thing to wrap this session. So Sonia, we'll go to you. Trish's question is, what do each of you see as your biggest challenge, and how can we support you in overcoming those? So in terms of what you're trying to achieve, Sonia, what can people be doing to support you, and what is that challenge?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, my biggest challenge right now is trying to support women, especially marginalized communities and ethnic minorities, into the workplace by building their confidence, their capabilities, and fundamentally their careers. So how you can help me is follow the Like-Minded Females page and sign up as a mentor or a mentee. We have a virtual mentoring program. It is anywhere between 3 to 6 months. It has lunch and learns, networking, workshops. It's already rated 98% success rate and 98% when it comes to finding the perfect partners, and matching, and 100% would recommend it. So the point being is, my biggest challenge is I want to help anyone and everyone. And sometimes, going back to our mental health kind of conversation, sometimes the biggest challenge is putting yourself first and saying, I can have this conversation next week, or I can, send them some resources rather than being on the phone. Or maybe this panel doesn't need me. This conversation doesn't need me. I can take myself back or out of it. And I think it comes from a point of like social impact and maybe, quite a humanitarian approach to say, if I've made it, why can you not make it? And I think how you can help me overcome that is if we can all pledge to pay it forward, to get involved, and to support at least one person this year through a conversation or through mentoring or through a coffee, and just support them in building their skills, their strengths, and moving forward. That's really going to change the world. And the reason why I speak about young professionals predominantly is because they're the ones that have really been impacted during this pandemic, right? The education system's been impacted, the students, graduate roles, and those entering into the system. And fundamentally, they're the ones who are going to now have to fix things, with all due respect. So if we can pass it forward, and if we can pay it forward, and we can give them the tools and resources and frameworks and the confidence to do that, then we are going to live a better society. We are going to have future leaders who really care about sustainability, mental health, well-being, and the future of work from an inclusion perspective. But most importantly, we as individuals are going to feel like we belong and we're contributing to something which is greater than all of us. And that really is my life mission. And so if you can help me, I would really be grateful.
Absolutely love that. And it costs nothing.
Right? No, it costs nothing.
That's the point. Brilliant message. Neil, what can people be doing to help you with your biggest challenge to drive the change we want to see, mate? What do we want to
Great. I'm going to take a lead from your positive mindset approach, Andrew. Just flip it on its head, because I think it's a great question, Trish. I would tend to say, like, what are my biggest opportunities ahead? Because I don't often wake up in the morning and think of barriers. Just, look at where I'm going. But I love the question. I'm just going to change it to, like, what are my biggest, opportunities to achieve what I can? And that would be, I think, getting through to a particularly difficult part of the workforce, which is the operative, the blue collar, the shift worker, the time for money employee. And there are a particular set of challenges that I haven't been able to break or make as much influence as I have over the years in the more professional services environment, where I've spent an awful lot of time and I've seen an awful lot of change. So right now I'm trying actively to get more conversations happening in those sectors: hospitality, construction, those operative, where the challenges are many, but the opportunities to level up that workforce that have the same mental health provision, investment are really great. And how you can help me doing that, if you know anybody that you work in those particular industries and you want to introduce them to conversations to get them to kind of, follow what we're doing, I want to make sure that I bring conversations from those particular sectors onto the LinkedIn Changemaker platform over the next year. That's my opportunity.
I love it. Absolutely amazing. I love the inclusivity that comes with your message there, mate. So thank you very much. Great chat. I'll very quickly wrap by saying how you can help me is by not being a hiring hypocrite, because I see a lot of people who are on the job market complaining about lack of feedback, complaining about how applicants are treated, complaining about this stuff. And then they suffer from what I call the Etch-a-Sketch effect, where they get into a job and they go, and they forget all about that. And they start doing all the same things that they were complaining about. So don't be a hiring hypocrite. That's how you can help me end job search misery and drive. Yeah, just remember there's a person behind the CV. There's a person on the other side of that interview. If we do that, we're doing well. We're going to wrap there. Thanks so much to the community for all your engagement. We've loved interacting with you. We've loved having you on stage. We've loved your comments. unprepared to entrepreneur out this week.
Can't help it.
Go on, Sonia. We love it. Big thanks to my fellow changemakers, Neil and Sonia. These guys are very busy people and are often on corporate do's and on stages, sharing the type of knowledge that they've given up their time for free to do today. So give them a big virtual clap. Click those
free?
Yeah, it's free. Yeah. Thank you. It's all right. Apologies. But yes, thanks so much for your time. It's been great collaborating with you. And thanks to LinkedIn for the Changemaker initiative and getting these conversations going. We're excited about what we can achieve together. And this is just the start. So thanks all. We'll see you soon and keep at it.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Career Jump podcast with Andrew MacAskill. For more resources and information, just head over to the Career Jump website at www.execcareerjump.com to supercharge your job search and start making moves. Let's get to work.